We're about to break down a massive shift in how the Philippines is run, and we're talking about a change worth over 200 billion pesos that, believe it or not, directly impacts your daily life, from the roads you drive on to the local clinic you might visit.
I mean, have you ever really thought about it? The simple answer is the local government, right? But where does their money come from? For decades, the system worked in a very specific way, until one single court ruling just completely rewrote the rulebook, forever changing the financial DNA of every single city and town in the country.
All right, so to really understand just how huge this change was, we first need to rewind a bit. We got to look at how things used to be, because for a long time, local funding was based on this very specific and, as it turns out, very limited formula.
Now, the whole idea behind giving towns and cities power is something called the subsidiarity principle. It's a really fancy term for a super simple idea. Your local mayor knows way more about whether your neighborhood needs a new health center or better drainage than some bureaucrat sitting in the capital, right? Local problems need local solutions. So, to fund those local solutions, the national government would give each town a slice of the national pie. This was called the Internal Revenue Allotment, or IRA. And the key word there, the really crucial word, is internal. The money only came from taxes collected by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the BIR.
In that one little word, internal, became the center of a legal battle that would just completely reshape local finance in the Philippines. I'm not talking about a minor tweak here. This was a fiscal earthquake.
So along comes Governor Hermilidanda Mandanas of Batangas. He takes a close look at the law, and he spots this huge discrepancy. He argues that the Constitution, the highest law of the land, says that local governments deserve a share of all national taxes, not just the internal ones.
And guess what? The Supreme Court agreed with him. So this meant the whole formula had to change. Under the old IRA system, the funding pool was only based on what the BIR collected. But under the new National Tax Allocation, or NTA, that pool suddenly got a lot bigger. It now includes all the tariffs and duties collected by the Bureau of Customs, too. The funding pie just got way bigger.
So how much bigger are we talking? Well, in the very first year of this new formula, the total amount of money flowing to local governments jumped by over 200 billion pesos. That is just a staggering amount of new cash flowing into provinces, cities, and municipalities.
To put that into perspective for you, the total share for local governments shot up by roughly 38%, basically overnight. It was the single largest funding increase for local governments in the country's entire history. But here's the catch. There's always a catch, right? The national government basically said, okay, you've got a whole lot more money now, which means you're also going to get a whole lot more work. This was the great trade-off.
So how did this all play out? Well, the 2018 Supreme Court ruling was the trigger. By 2021, an executive order came down mandating full devolution. Basically, it pushed a whole bunch of new responsibilities from the national level down to the local level. But as you can see, the plan kind of ran into some trouble, which forced an adjustment in 2024.
And what kind of new responsibilities are we talking about here? We're not talking small stuff. We're talking about core services. All of a sudden, your local mayor was in charge of funding things the national government always used to handle, like agricultural support, social welfare programs, and even building local health centers and school buildings. Now, it sounded really good in theory, more money, more local control, but in practice, especially for these smaller, poorer towns, it created a massive new set of problems. The government quickly realized it was going to have to hit the pause button.
Let's look at how this actually worked out for some towns. So imagine a hypothetical small town, we'll call it San Isidro. It gets an extra 20 million pesos from the new NTTA. Great, but the cost of all the new health and agriculture services it now has to cover is 25 million pesos. So the town actually ended up with a 5 million peso deficit. More money actually put them in the red. Crazy, right?
And on top of that, a lot of these smaller municipalities just didn't have what experts call absorptive capacity. It's a fancy way of saying they didn't have the people, the engineers, the accountants, the project planners, needed to actually spend these new billions effectively on complex projects. The money was there, but the expertise just wasn't.
So recognizing that these towns were pretty much at risk of drowning, the national government issued a new order, and they extended the deadline. Now, most provinces and municipalities have until 2028 to fully take on all those new functions, which gives them some much-needed breathing room to prepare.
But this whole situation, it really highlights a much deeper, more fundamental challenge for local governments in the Philippines, a really dangerous reliance on money from the national government.
There's this concept in public finance that has a really catchy name, and it perfectly describes this problem. They call it the Flypaper Effect. The idea is that money, well, it sticks where it hits.
Okay, so here's how it works. When a town gets a big chunk of cash from the national government, they pretty much just spend it all. They don't really use that opportunity to, say, lower local business taxes to encourage more economic growth. And this makes them less motivated to collect their own revenue, so they become deeply dependent on that check from the capital.
And the result is a dependency that can be pretty startling. In many towns, a staggering 90%, sometimes even more, of their entire budget comes from this one source, the NTA. Only a tiny little sliver comes from the taxes and fees they actually collect themselves. If that national money ever dried up, they would pretty much just collapse.
And all of this brings us right back to you and your community. The Mandanas-Garcia ruling poured billions into local coffers, yeah, but it also exposed this fundamental weakness in the system. And it forces us all to ask a really important question. Is your town using this money to become stronger and more self-reliant, or is it just falling deeper into that dependency trap? Is your town truly built to last?